The pain of staying the same has to be worse than the pain of changing.
You're listening to the What the Gut podcast, where busy moms can come for a holistic approach to health and vitality. I'm Allison, your host, a holistic health and wellness coach. In this space, we'll dive into the intricacies of achieving holistic wellness while balancing the demands of daily life as a busy mom. What the Gut is your haven for navigating the challenges that come with juggling numerous tasks while aiming for a healthier, more balanced life. Join me as we uncover practical solutions to common health hurdles, from managing fatigue to understanding all things gut health. Through insightful discussions, actionable insights, and tailored lifestyle strategies, my goal here is to empower you to embrace a vibrant, nourishing life while saying goodbye to being overwhelmed and exhausted. So if you're ready to embark on this transformative journey towards holistic well-being, hit that subscribe button. Get ready to discover the secrets to thriving in motherhood while nurturing your overall wellness. A quick reminder, everything discussed here is for educational and empowering purposes only and is not intended for personalized medical advice. Consult your personal healthcare provider for personalized medical advice. Welcome to What the Gut, where we create our own path to holistic health, one episode at a time.
Welcome to What the Gut. Today, I'm thrilled to have Amanda Panacea, a holistic practitioner and licensed mental health counselor, on the show. Amanda brings a wealth of knowledge and personal experience to the table, having overcome debilitating conditions like mold illness, mast cell activation syndrome, or MCAS, and emotional trauma. With advanced training in modalities like blood chemistry, bioenergetics, EMDR, Theta healing, and psychoneuroimmunology, Amanda helps her clients address the root cause of their health concerns by combining mind, body, spirit. Her journey of transforming her own health and guiding others is really inspiring. Let's dive into her story and explore how she has helped others heal from complex chronic illness. Amanda, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, I'm excited to have you here today. I know that so much of your journey and things you've experienced are so common, but I have not gotten to speak to anybody directly who has experienced some of these things. And so
Great.
I'm like, this is going to be just so interesting. So you have a really significant health journey. Can you take us back to when your journey with mold illness, MCAS, and all these other challenges really started?
Yeah, well, even in childhood, I always had histamine issues. I asked my mom, when did my allergies start? And she was like, you were allergic to your stuffed animals, like when you were a baby. So I just thought, oh, this is me. This is my genetics. I was the kid who kind of always had like bronchitis, and I would get pneumonia a lot. So I was allergies, asthma, that kind of presentation. I had eczema on and off a few times. And then in my 20s, I actually was like deep and heavily abusing drug and alcohol, on like really big into party culture. And my health was actually not so bad during this time period, ironically. But then around 30, things really started to crash. So I experienced really significant burnout from my lifestyle, and then plus the career that I had. I was working in psychiatric hospitals and admissions. So everyone there is having the worst day of their lives. They're in crisis. And after that burnout, I really started to get back into, okay, I want to start to take care of myself. I want to start to get healthy. And I really want out of these scenes of party culture and going out every weekend, staying out late. And when I kind of asked the universe for a reason and to get out of that, the world gave me one. So I developed hepatitis A, which is a virus that attacks your liver. Had no idea what was going on, went to the hospital. And I was like, oh, wow, well, this is a really big welcome to never have alcohol again, because my liver is now screwed for a while. The good news is hepatitis A goes away after a couple months, but my liver enzymes were elevated for probably 9 months after that. So you have to be really careful, obviously. And it was during that time period that I was healing that I got exposed to mold. And since mold is fat soluble and our liver has to break it down and process it, I think that's why I got so sick, because I've been in Florida my entire adult life and had been around leaks and mold before, but had never gotten that sick before. So
Yeah.
that was around like 2019 that all started. And when I started developing the mold illness, I was actually in my graduate program for functional medicine and nutrition. And so I was trying all of the things and I was doing everything that they recommended. And I was spending so much money on supplements that, promised mold detox and anti-inflammatory and mast cell stabilization. But I developed rashes all over head to toe, eczema, as my asthma flared really bad again. And that's when I started getting like a lot of the mental health symptoms of mast cell and histamine, like panic and weird, bizarre thoughts. And I was just already a therapist. And I was like, what is going on? Like, I started feeling like I was swallowing too much air at one point and I wasn't swallowing correctly. Just weird stuff, right? And I've talked to so many people who've also experienced stuff like that. Like, mold really messes with your head because, again, it's fat soluble. So it can affect the brain too. And then during that time period, actually, I graduated functional medicine. And I'm like, well, great. I'm at the work. I have 2 master's degrees and I'm in the worst health condition ever.
Isn't it crazy how stuff like that happens? That like how the universe works out like that.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was like, how am I even going to help people? I don't even know what's going on. And mast cell hadn't really blown up back in 2019-ish yet. I knew what it was, though. I knew what mold illness was. I had studied all the Shoemaker protocols and all the big names in mold illness. And I did all that stuff for a really long time. And none of it was working. I just kept getting worse and worse for about 2 to 3 years. And then that's when I found something called low-dose immunotherapy. And I thought, oh, this is it. This is going to save me. However, they recommended a short round of prednisone, oral steroids, because I was so inflamed. And I really didn't want to do it, but the doctor said you should do it because you have such severe inflammation. It's not going to work as well. And I read the research. Dr. Ty Vincent's research also said that. And I was like, okay, I'll do it. And that short round of prednisone, it was only 12 days, sent me into what's called topical steroid withdrawal. It was from oral steroids, but the name is topical steroids. You can develop it from oral or topicals. And just that 12 days of oral steroids sent me into years of steroid withdrawal. So that was the actual worst, most horrific part of my journey.
Oh my goodness. There's so many like good nuggets here. With the steroid withdrawal though, there's so many symptoms with that. What kind of symptoms did you have with that when that like really, it's like you were just kind of going up this mountain to like things keep getting worse and worse and worse, even though you literally were trained in like how to do all this stuff. Oh my goodness. So what was the steroid withdrawal like for you?
So steroid withdrawal completely made me disabled for almost a year. Your entire body starts to your skin starts to like melt and peel off.
I have seen so many pictures of stuff like that. I've never seen that in practice, but I'm like, when you said that, I was like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. I took a picture every day to kind of document the progress. Cause at first I was like, oh man, I'm going to have to go through this for a couple of months. Hopefully it doesn't get as bad because I only took like less than 2 weeks, right? I wasn't using steroids for years because I actually knew that it existed. So I didn't want to use them for that reason, ironically. You have no temperature regulation because your blood vessels are just openly dilated and you're actually leaking plasma out. So your skin is on fire. You have no barrier there, but internally you're freezing. Like you start to shake and you don't want to wear clothes. You can't touch anything. Everything became traumatic. I had to sit straight up and couldn't even lean back on anything. That lasted for at least 9 months. And then around that time period is when I started to do a few other things that really helped me to start to recover. But some people go through steroid withdrawal for years. I've worked with people who are on like year 8, and it's just honestly the worst condition.
It's like you did your own research. I always tell my listeners, whatever you decide to do, whether it's the medication from your prescriber or natural remedies, like whatever it is, like be informed. And the thing is, like you did your own research and like weighed out the pros and the cons, and you made the best decision that you could have made at that point in time. There's no way you could have known that that would have happened.
Right. I like that you bring this up though, too, because this is also something looking back that I'm like, oh, maybe that had something to do with it. So I didn't want to take it. And I was kind of in resistance. And I was subconsciously saying, well, everyone keeps telling me I'm getting worse. Just do what the doctors say. Just take regular medicine. Just go to a regular doctor. And in my subconscious mind, it was like, show them that medicine is going to really harm you, you know? And so, of course, I didn't react well to the medicine because I didn't want to take it. And so that energy that I put into it, I got back. So if you do have to
Exactly.
take medication, which I did end up later also to help stabilize, go on other prescribed medications. But if you do have to take that, you really have to accept and welcome in that medication. And some people say like, bless the meds, but whatever you
Yes.
need to say to really allow for that medicine to be part of your healing journey and not your making me worse journey.
Right, right. I love that you point that out too, because I mean, yeah, like you want to have an informed decision and be confident in your decision, whether that is like just listening to your doctor, taking the medicines, like at least be confident in yourself in that decision. I really like that you pointed that out. And, when you go back to mold illness, like I was talking to somebody, this was on a previous podcast episode I did about mold. They were a like mold inspector and got rid of mold and all this stuff in all these houses. And I mean you kind of know it, but once you really think about mold and mold illness, I mean like it decomposes. So
Yeah.
it's literally not only fat soluble, but it's like breaking down. You're inhaling it, it's breaking your body down and everything else you were experiencing. Like my goodness. My goodness.
I went through it for a couple years for sure.
So I want to ask you, it's kind of a loaded question, but how did all of those experiences really shape your approach to healing? And like,
Mhm.
how did you finally get to, obviously, you look like you're in a great place now,
Yeah, great question. So obviously I was a therapist first. And then in that field, I was like, this is barbaric. Like therapy meds, they don't work. I worked in higher level of care. So it was just seeing, are you taking your meds, loading people on both meds and sending them out the door? So I didn't really see the best of the psychology world and psychiatric world, but that's what we had. So when I went back to school for functional medicine, I thought, this is it. We're going to do diet, we're going to do supplements, and that's going to be the thing. And what I found was that neither of those things were actually the answer. And I was constantly, like most of us do, looking for something outside of ourselves to fix how we feel internally.
I love that you point that
Uh,
out.
yeah. And, sometimes it works. I'm not going to say diet and supplements and all that don't work because I still practice those things.
For sure.
But it was kind of like, okay, I did that, didn't help. And then you add that layer of things. I started adding the biohacking, the expensive supplements, the circadian rhythm stuff. I mean, you name it, I did all of those things and nothing was moving the needle. And that's when I really started to surrender to, okay, I'm going to stop trying to force fixing whatever is going on. And I started to go back to those roots of, I need to just accept that this is my life now, and it may be years that I'm struggling with this. And I really started to go deeper at that time into nervous system regulation and trauma work, and started to gain lots of different trainings and certifications in that realm. And I kind of made a pledge to stop overly obsessing about finding the latest thing that I thought was going to help, like fix the symptom, and
Yeah.
really started to focus just on the nervous system and emotional health. Because I was a chronic overachiever, overdoer, like busy 100% of the time. I went from work and achieving to getting 2 master's degrees and
Right.
also going out constantly. I never, ever sat still.
Yeah.
And I thought I was doing pretty good because my other friends had like these big emotional things going on in their lives. And even though I had a lot of relationship trauma through those years of like drug and alcohol use, I thought that I was okay. But really, I was in this functionally frozen state where I never really processed anything. I just
Well,
kept sweeping it under the rugs.
yeah, I love that. I love that you pointed that out too. But even like all of your medical challenges through this, like that is so much trauma that you
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
probably were not processing or dealing with appropriately either,
Nope. Yeah. Because when you're in that like something is so terribly wrong, you feel unsafe no matter where you are. You really feel unsafe in your body. So guess what? That further is like your disconnection. You shut it down. So now you're all up in your mind trying to find a solution to how you're feeling down here, and you're refusing to feel or accept any of it. You're like, how can this be my life? I'm doing all the right things, right? So that's where I really found the most healing, was just letting go that veil of like, I have to be a certain way. How could this be my life? And the resistance to what was actually happening, and started to really just focus on how can I feel better emotionally now? Like, how can I sit with this discomfort, but still find some joy, you know?
And you're a licensed mental health counselor. So, like, this is the stuff you were helping people with all the time, as much as you can, besides whenever you're just checking if they're taking their meds because you only got 5 minutes with them. We know how that works. So, through all of that, though, like, what was that like once you finally just kind of basically took yourself off this pedestal of like, okay, are you going to get better? Are you going to get better? Are you going to get better? Like, once you took all that pressure off of yourself, what was that like?
Well, it was very difficult, but I will always remember that moment, that day, where Dr. Joe Dispenza talks about this too, and Tony Robbins and all these big names in like transformation. The pain of staying the same has to be worse than the pain of changing. When you're just so sick of your own stuff, when you're just like, wow, it's been years of me trying to figure this out and I'm worse. So maybe I should just suck it up and take the L and do something different for once in my life. And that's when I really started to see some improvements, because I spent a lot of time on the mind-body connection, studying somatic healing and somatic experiencing by Dr. Peter Levine. And that honestly was the thing that helped me the most. People are always looking for, like, I do EMDR with my clients and stuff now, and they're looking for like, oh, if I have one session and this energy release, am I going to feel better immediately after? And I try to tell people, no, you probably won't. You might feel relaxed, but you have to change how you are on a minute-to-minute level, and you have to practice that minute to minute. So,
Yeah. Well, and like, be open-minded when you come to a session to do the EMDR. If you're like, is this going to work? Is this going to work?
right.
That negative energy is going to not really like help the whole situation.
Yeah, exactly. Like, if you are looking for something to fix you and you're not looking to actually take accountability for your role in that, then it won't work
Yeah,
at all.
exactly.
Yeah.
I love that you point that out too. That's something that I've really been focusing on a lot lately. And it's like, even if we didn't get to where we are with our health on purpose by any means, I mean, we didn't plan to have gut issues or, have MCAS or mold illness or autoimmune issues. We didn't plan on getting there, but we do have to take responsibility, because it's like
Yeah.
our genetic pathways are programmed to go a certain direction if we don't actively try to take it a different way, or like our lifestyle. And I mean, like you said, like going out drinking all the time. I think a lot of people go through phases in their life like that because it's easy if your friend group's going that way too, right? And so if we don't actively try to have a goal in mind of like, this is how I want my life to be, I want to be healthy, we're naturally going to go down this route of like having all these things happen to us because we live in a toxic world. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's going to happen. But I really want to go back to MCAS and mold illness. Now, what do you see? Like, you've worked with so many different clients experiencing chronic conditions. What are some of the most common root causes with MCAS and mold illness besides mold exposure?
Yeah. So again, I kind of pointed out I'd been exposed to mold before. So what was going on this second time? And I think that hepatitis had a lot to do with it, but I also think I had reached that highest level of toxin bucket. The stress,
Yeah.
toxin exposure, my
Total
history of
toxic.
accumulating. Absolutely. And I created what I call a 6-layer model of mast cell. So that outermost layer is, we know if you have that diagnosis, or if you suspect it, or SIRS or something along that line, then we know that you're in that chronic threat cell danger response. Like, you're there. You can't escape that. It's there.
Which But I want to say it's so crazy too, because it seems like maybe I know more people now than I ever have in my life, but it seems like more people are being diagnosed with MCAS too.
Absolutely. Yeah, they are. Yep. In the last 4 years, I used to have like 1 or 2 people that I worked with, and now it's like most of my practice. I probably attract them because of what I went through, but I see more and more influencers and health practitioners on the internet also talking about how much they are seeing it too.
Yeah, it's really wild.
On that outer layer, we know that you're in that cell danger response. And then why? You know, a lot of practitioners or doctors will say, oh, well, you just have to be on these mast cell stabilizers and antihistamines now. Like, no. Okay, maybe for a short period of time, but why am I experiencing this? So, underneath that is that toxicity bucket, like we just talked about, the stress, the toxin exposure, the nutrient deficiencies, the trauma history, and we have these chronic infections most likely. So mold infection, candida, parasite, and this is where a lot of people get stuck because with mast cell, you're already in this cell danger response. So everything's already being seen as a threat. And if you start to kill pathogens and try to clear that toxicity, most people are so sensitive that it's just going to make them worse. And that's kind of what I experience and a lot of people experience. So why would we have these chronic infections? Well, underneath that, why aren't our organs clearing chronic infections? Why do we have these really inflamed tissues? Why do we have the POTS symptoms, the hypermobility all of a sudden? Those kind of go hand in hand. Like the whole body is just so inflamed and we have mast cells everywhere. So they're degranulating more inflammation and more histamine constantly. And we have these chronic infections. So deeper than that, okay, well, why would we have so much inflammation? Well, if we have these chronic stress, if we've got hormonal imbalances, like everyone demonizes cortisol, but cortisol is actually anti-inflammatory. So it actually
To
helps
protect you.
the chronically dysregulated hormones from even deeper chronic stress from modern lifestyle, from heavy drug or alcohol use like I experienced, or from nutrient deficiencies that are passed down, from heavy metal exposures. Ever since the Industrial Revolution, we are more and more exposed and accumulating these heavy metals, and then we have forever chemicals.
Yeah.
And then even deeper than that, at the core is those core trauma, attachment wounding, because that sets up your nervous system for having these limiting beliefs that you're seeing the world through. And when you see the world through these lenses of everyone betrays me or everyone abandons me or I'm always a victimized or attacked, then because we have a confirmation bias, you are going to see those things and experience those things, which is going to keep your stress levels high, which is going to keep you seeking out ways to cope with those types of stressors, which usually are maladaptive. And so, yes, we might have these chronic infections, but underneath all of this usually comes down to chronic stress, chronic trauma, not dealing with it appropriately, which leads to nutrient imbalances, which leads to imbalances in hormones and inflammation. And as you can see, it just branches out.
Yeah. I love how you break that all down. It's crazy. I mean, our society, I just think of women specifically, like getting multiple master's degrees, going back to school. I mean, I've got multiple degrees too. And it's like, it's a great thing. But, then you're working. And if you have kids, it's so much stress. And it is hard to balance it all. And we shouldn't act like we can do everything. Even if we can do everything, we can't do it all at one time,
Yeah.
That's the thing. But I mean, you really emphasize nervous system regulation in your practice. And so I think you kind of touched on it, but is there any other things you want to add to it, I guess? Like as far as trauma and unresolved emotional stress, how is that really impacting the nervous system and contributing to chronic illness?
Yeah, I always talk about foundation of like circadian rhythm because when you are in such a bad state, it's oftentimes like I felt insulted when someone was like, "Oh, you got to do trauma work and work with your nervous system." I was like, I literally cannot function or go outside. Like, how can I do trauma work? So I like to start with easier things like circadian rhythms and light exposure. and the food, that some of the things we can control a little easier, and sometimes medications for stabilization if needed. But with nervous system regulation, it's not about like breath work and meditation so much. If you like that, if it's something that you find joy in, then great, do it. But a lot of time, if you tell somebody who's already so overwhelmed that they have to add a new thing to their list, they're most likely not going to be able to do it, or it might dysregulate them further. So what I like to start with is the somatic piece, just learning how to feel in your body. Because most of us, again, are really up in our heads and just thinking constantly about the problem and how to fix it, and ruminating over what didn't happen, what needs to happen. And that somatic piece is so simple. It's very boring to start there. I always tell people, if it's boring you to do this, you're doing it right.
Okay, so tell me more. Like what?
Because you're probably so overstimulated that being still or focusing on how your body feels, like, what do my feet feel like? What would it feel like to bring the awareness into my feet? Just simple exercises like that, bringing the energy out of the head into the body. Like, how could I move today from my heart space instead of my head? And, little exercises. I tell people, you don't have to sit down and meditate to do this, although you can. But like when I'm going for a walk, I'm just feeling like, what does it feel like to be in my body? How do my hips feel? How do my knees feel? And without judgment or thinking, oh, these old knees, oh my gosh, there's pain there. You just bring awareness to it. You just pay attention to it. And that's kind of where I like to start people, because you can do that no matter if you can't move, if you're bedridden, or if you are working a 9 to 5 and have 5 kids and no one to help you. You can do that no matter what moment of the day that you're in.
Yeah.
And that starts to bridge that mind-body connection, which allows you to feel safe, right? When you're in the moment, nothing is actually happening. You are actually safe, because the brain is constantly receiving the information you're feeding it. So if you're constantly thinking, something's wrong with me, then guess what? You're going to stay in that fight, flight, or freeze energy if you're already in that collapse, and you're not going to be able to get out of it until you start to feel safe.
Yes. Look, I love that. I'm just like, okay, I'm going to go back and listen to this episode so I can focus on this, Amanda, because I love how you said, like, if you're bored doing this, then you're doing it right. And you're not having to add something else. I think that that's where I see a lot of my clients. We focus more so on like gut health, but it is a whole body holistic approach. We focus on sleep, nutrition, all these things. But so many of my clients I see, they're just like, okay, I can't add one more thing. And it's like, okay, well, then let's break it down and we do smaller things. But I really like how you reframe it into like, we're not adding anything. It's literally amplifying what you're already doing, just optimizing what you're already doing. And if you're bored, then you're doing it right, because you're so used to being overstimulated. You need to just slow down. I need to tell my kids that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Kids, I wish they taught this kind of stuff in school, like how to actually self-soothe yourself, or how to feel safe in your body. It could be one class once a year.
Yeah, it could be. Now, you're trained in so many different modalities like EMDR, theta healing, and bioenergetics. How do you decide like which approach to use with each client? And like, can you kind of share a story where this integrative approach made a difference?
Yeah, so one of my clients recently, actually, she, on kind of pivoting on what we were just talking about, she said, my life doesn't actually look any different, but I am moving through it and feel differently about my life. So like more present, more joy, starting to appreciate things more, noticing the beautiful things in life as opposed to the pain and what's wrong. So that's a really great example of how you don't have to become some like crazy biohacker to start to feel better, right? You can start like in small increments. In my practice, I combine testing with that nervous system coaching. I just call it transformation coaching. But everyone looks different just depending on where they're coming from. So some people come to just do that transformation coaching. learning somatic, doing something like EMDR or getting into trauma work, if they're already pretty resourced or if they've, been in this space a while and they get it, they've read some books, they're doing things, but still kind of feeling stuck. If someone is coming and is like, I have no idea what's going on in my body, I've never done any alternative testing, I really want to know some answers, that's where we'll start with something like bioenergetic, because that's going to give you the full picture. With bioenergetic, you can see where the stress is, like the organs that are stressed. You can see what is in imbalance, hormones, nutrients, neurotransmitters. You can see what products or what lifestyle changes. Like, for example, it will come up with like preferred method, homeopathy or nutrition. It will also show resonating therapies like craniosacral therapy or somatic work. So it's pretty cool. It gives you like so much information. I also run a full emotional scan, which can show limiting beliefs and even generational patterns that get passed down. So you can see, I've had literal clients say, that is my thought every day. Like I think that thought every
God, it sounds very validating,
Yeah. So it's it's eerily specific. And then also it helps you kind of realize I'm not out of control. I see all the puzzle pieces together and now we have a starting point, because with bioenergetics, you also will know where to start. Like we put together a protocol, whether that's with a diet or lifestyle changes, supplements, herbs, homeopathy. And we can also imprint a homeopathic tincture with the balancing frequencies of what you need. So that's also kind of a cool thing that we can add on. With something like HTMA or hair tissue mineral analysis, it doesn't give you as much information as bioenergetic, but this was actually the test that really catapulted me into healing, because it's a way to understand what nutrients do I need and how much. It's actually pretty mathematical how you create a protocol from it. A lot of practitioners, including one of my grad school teachers, didn't understand the HTMA the correct way. And so I poo-pooed it for a long time thinking it's not
Yeah.
validated. My teacher said this and that. And then when I actually learned how to read it and understand it myself, I realized that he wasn't trained in how to understand it. So I started using it, and it gets you out of that like binders and mold detox and parasite cleanses and herbs for Lyme, and into just what nutrients do I need for my body and in what amount. And for the HTMA, you're just looking at the entire mineral system, which again kind of leaves some things up to the imagination. But when we look at the whole mineral system, we avoid taking anything that's going to push ourselves into further dysregulation, because
Right.
everything has an antagonist and a synergist. And the long-term goal of HTMA is to start to release heavy metal, which there is nothing else out there that is safer than replenishing your body with the minerals and the nutrients that it needs to release the metals. Like no
Yeah.
chelators, no binders, definitely not chelation therapy. That can be really aggressive and really dangerous. And with mineral balancing, it's slow. I've been doing it for years now, but with releasing metal, you're not going through like ripping the metal out of where it is. You're letting the body let go of it when it's ready, when it has enough of the nutrients. So it's a lot safer. With someone who's super sensitive, mineral balancing with HTMA can be a little difficult in the beginning. So sometimes I'll start with the bioenergetics first. But if somebody's not really sensitive, then I like to do both those tests at the same time, because you get like a full picture.
Yeah. Now with the bioenergetics testing, how is that done? How do you test with that? Is that blood test?
No, it's hair and saliva.
It's all
So
hair and
it's really
saliva.
easy. Yeah. And the HTMA is also hair. So HTMA, they're actually burning the hair and measuring the light frequencies of the minerals and the metals. Whereas bioenergetics is a technology where it's actually kind of asking your hair and saliva sample like hundreds of thousands of questions at once to see if there's a resonating frequency pattern. And if there is, then it'll put it into the data. And then I look through the data and understand, where's the connection? Why would this be coming up? How does it make sense with like all the other data points? I'm a huge nerd for stuff like that. As much as I love the emotional piece, I love the like biochemistry and bioenergetics.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think like some people, you can look at it both ways. I mean, like in my practice, or in my education, I was always taught, like, don't rely on just the labs, right? Like, you need that emotional piece and how is the person actually feeling and what they're experiencing. But it is so validating too, to
Mhm.
see the numbers and see the data and be like, okay, like I'm not crazy. Like I knew something was wrong. I knew something was up. Something's going
Yeah.
on. And to see that data is always
Mhm.
validating.
For people who are like, well, those tests are not validated, HTMA has been around since the 70s, I think maybe even the late 60s. So hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of hair tests have been looked at. And with bioenergetics, we use technology like MRIs, like ultrasounds, like EKGs that are also looking at like resonating frequency patterns. So it's not exactly the same, but there's a ton of bioresonance machines out there. Some of them might be a couple $100, and others, like the one that I use, is more like $16,000 to $20,000. So there's definitely a big gap in like accuracy and the amount of information and the kinds of information that you can get from these. So if you've walked in and done like putting your hand on something and the chiro gave you, oh, well, you've stress here, here, and here. That's not exactly the same as like an even more expensive machine. So they get like a little bit more accurate and better
Yeah.
information too. And also I compare it to lab work too. People come to me with blood work or we can order blood work. And I always am like, this is showing up on blood work and here's what it says in these tests. And that's why it's showing up on blood work. So over the last like 6 years, I feel like those tests are more accurate than anything like functional medicine tests that I used to do.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Now, I've heard of EMDR specifically like for people with like mental blocks, like can't get past certain things. Maybe you're stuck in cyclic patterns of things. Now, can you explain just kind of like for people out there who've never heard of it, like what EMDR is and the theta healing?
Yeah, so EMDR stands for eye movement desensitization reprocessing. So it's a long acronym for basically bilateral stimulation using the eyes, which in itself is pretty simple. Now, with EMDR, when you go to a therapist that's trained in it, um, there's a whole process, right? It's not just the bilateral stimulation, but you can use bilateral stimulation for a similar purpose in your own life. So I've kind of created my own 5-step process that I like to teach people. I have a course called Feel to Heal. It's feeltoheal.co, not .com. And the Feel to Heal process is using some bilateral stimulation to help with what's called amygdala depotentiation. So that's a really long word for basically we are desensitizing the amygdala to a stressor or like a big trauma or something like that. But it could be any kind of trigger. So EMDR is looking at like when you go to a therapist, it might be a big trauma. But when we are doing it bilateral stimulation, like walking or something like that. So when we're doing something like bilateral stimulation to a trigger, it could be like going for a walk when you're angry, right? Everyone says like, when you're angry, go for a walk, you'll feel a little bit better. And that's because you're desensitizing that sympathetic fight or flight energy from that trigger. So with bilateral stimulation, it doesn't have to be the eye movement. It could be like tapping one side or the other.
Yeah,
Well,
like, yeah.
yeah, as long as it's one and then the other. It could be going for a walk. And that kind of helps you process whatever emotional stuff is going on, right? Like
Yeah.
intense anger, rage, sadness, pain, all of that can be processed with that bilateral stimulation. And then Theta healing is an energy healing technique, which I did a couple different trainings that you might heard of, like mind, body, spirit release, or even Reiki is an energy healing technique. With Theta healing, you are connecting to creator and you're allowing the wisdom of creator or divine wisdom, God, whatever you want to call it, to flow through and help to repattern different nervous system limiting beliefs or triggers. And you can use theta healing for almost anything. So like we will figure out what are some of these bottom beliefs, like what are the biggest bottom beliefs for people that are really keeping them stuck. Like a big one that I see is I'm not safe in my body, or my body is unsafe, or I'm not safe at all in relationships, in the world. And we can actually repattern that to I am safe in my body using this energy healing technique. Now, once that energy healing session is over, you have to have the tools to practice living like that, right? Because if we look at neuroscience, if we are getting rid of something, that pathway, if it's pruned, we have to have another pathway to go down. So if you've lived your whole life feeling not safe in your body, and now all of a sudden you do an energy technique and okay, it worked, we have to now practice feeling safe in our body. So that's why I always start with the somatic piece, because with energy healing techniques like that, you might prune the connection, but it's going to go right back if you don't have the tools to keep living with that change that's been made, essentially.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah. I know I've heard a lot about like EMDR with people that have PTSD, but then also like the theta healing. I vaguely have heard of it with, certain people stuck in cyclic patterns, but it's like, I think finding the right person to work with who's educated in how to help them navigate that. Like you said, like you've got to have somewhere for that path to go, another tool to use, or you'll end up right back where you were. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So I'm curious, Amanda, like for listeners who just really feel overwhelmed or stuck in their healing process, what is one practical step that you would say they could take today to move forward with their health?
Yeah. And I think that learning that somatic piece, but also how your brain works, like they call it brain retraining in the chronic illness healing space, which is helpful. That's a top-down approach. The somatic healing is bottom up. And they say about 80% of the information is coming from the bottom up. So learning how to feel safe in the body, but also understanding, my mind is going to make connections between things. It doesn't mean that they're true. Understanding kind of how the brain is going to lead you down paths and beliefs that are probably not accurate, so that moment to moment, like I said, we have to change like how we're thinking, how we're feeling moment to moment to really change the disease patterns in the body. If you are educated and understand how your mind is working and also what to do to feel safe in the body, that to me, nobody can take that away from you. You're going to be able to practice that indefinitely. And it might not be some big crazy release like you see on like healing retreats where they're like, oh my gosh, I cried so much, or this psychedelic experience, I released everything and now I'm perfectly fine. It's probably not going to look like that. But in a couple months, you'll see, looking back, there will be a difference. In a couple years, you will definitely see a difference. So to me, that part is the most foundational.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. Now, whenever you work with people, what does that look like? Do you have a website? I know you had the Feel to Heal.
That's my course, which is teaching that 5-step process. It does have nervous system 101 and a background on like how our mind works and what to expect, as well as guided meditations and guided sessions. But my actual website is thehealerrevolution.com. And that's where you can find my services, my podcast, and how to work with me, like book a 15-minute call. And I do the testing and or the emotional healing techniques. So we can do both. We can do one, we can do the other. I kind of just meet people where they are and what they're looking for.
Yeah, that's awesome. Amanda, is there anything else you want to leave our listeners with today? I feel like this was just such a cool conversation.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been really fun. I would say just keep going. Like you mentioned, feeling stuck, which so many people do, and I did for so many years. But if you consistently show up in alignment with who you want to be, then the things you need will eventually find you. And that's what I choose to believe. So that, I believe that in myself. I've seen it in myself. I've seen it with so many people I've worked with. And I do think that if you can develop a disease, you can reverse it.
Love it. Love it.
Thank you for being a part of my journey on What the Gut podcast. For a deeper dive into today's topics, head over to AllisonandWellness.com/whatthegut or find the detailed show notes linked below. Hey, and don't miss out on future episodes. Hit that subscribe button, and if you love this one, please leave me a review. Let's keep the conversation going over on Instagram. Connect with me and stay updated and engaged with my awesome community. Plus, share these valuable insights with your tribe. They deserve to feel as amazing as you do. You can find me at Allison_and_wellness on Instagram. Your support means the world to me. I'm looking forward to our next awesome chat. But until then, stay curious, don't drink too much coffee, keep the vibrant energy flowing, and take care of your gut. Catch you real soon. Oh, and hey, if you're ready to dive deeper into personalized wellness, check out my one-on-one health coaching program at AllisonandWellness.com. Let's make your journey to holistic health truly transformative.